Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, it's overcast, but it's comfortable. It's 50 something, and there's no wind to speak of, and I can hear birds chirping and colors growing, so it's a good time. Holly and I are dealing with, a concern we have that she may have a virus that they found in her lungs. And the only safe way to handle that, because it might amount to nothing if she did nothing, but you don't take that risk, because the theory in transplants, as probably most of you know, is you don't want an infection because it leads to rejection. So you fight infections as the first line of defense. And it's like the entire body is asleep to the fact that there's this foreign item inside, namely the lungs, the new lungs, the 14-year-old lungs. And so it's like when the system, forgive my metaphors, when the system is awakened, it says, what's going on? And that can lead to rejection. And so that's why you have immunosuppression medicines and so forth with all sorts of side effects. Okay, so all that is said is that Holly is at Johns Hopkins, and she'll be there for 3 days to be cautious and to give her medicines that will hopefully avoid any inflammation of her lungs, and that's the trick. Are we concerned? Of course we're concerned, but we're not like cats on a hot tin roof anymore, because we've been through this and it doesn't serve us well. But also we think the prognostication is good, but we do everything we have to do. So I'm sorry if I spent too much time on that, but that's the rest of the day was spent writing, and I have papers to file. The news that I find interesting, we're talking a little bit about what is free speech and censorship and speech that is not free because it's irresponsible and reckless and can cause harm to a person physically as well as to their reputation. Okay, so there's a whole variety of things. But there's an interesting kind of thing. There's a famous director, famous in China, and his name is Wang, and his first name I can't pronounce. And he has shown some genius over the years with very little material. In fact, the first movie he did, he spent the equivalent of about $6,000 on it, and small cameras and things like that. And it was considered at the festivals brilliant. And over the years, he's done a lot of film, and the censorship hasn't compromised his work, but now it is. And so there was a film he recently did, and it involved 20 claims by the party which controls the censorship of these things. And they kind of want Disney happiness, and that's fine, but you have to have diversity for all the various creative contexts and stories you might want to tell. And so he's dealing with that censorship. Now you might say, oh, well, luckily we would never have that. And the reason I mention it, and the reason it struck me, was that we had the alien and sedition laws. And if you said certain things at the beginning of our nation, you could be prosecuted for it, and some were. And it was one of the things I think that adversely affected Adams finding the popularity to have a second term. And he was, of course, very upset with Jefferson, and they didn't reconcile for many years afterwards. And the third step in my thinking here is to go from a director in China to John Adams and an Alien Sedition Act, and what Trump would do, because he's of that ilk, of that personality in government, that free speech is not to be tolerated, certainly if it criticizes Trump. Another thing that I found interesting is there were big stories about how kids are not going to school. They're studying at home, they're distance learning, and I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is that there was a member of Congress I work closely with, and she brought her family from where they lived, and they were going to school in Fairfax. And she got to see what they were teaching the kids. And she took the kids out of the school and then put them back in the native state from whence they came. And the claim, well, let's just put it this way. The teaching in Virginia was not faithful to what she understood. And I couldn't agree more. So there is that. Now, my daughter in Loudoun County, I had a good sense of the teachers and so forth, and I thought the schools were good. But now the question is, what about telecommuting to school? And when I was a kid in the Bronx and TVs started carrying stuff, I watched shows on, I was a little strange, by the way, calculus and things like this. And this is when I was in grammar school and of course in high school. And so that seems natural to me, and I'm of a generation in which I don't think we were thinking that way back then. And then some of the tools that we used in school were, in language class for instance, someone intoning another language with the accent and the fullness of a foreign language so that you'd understand it. And these things can be really done anywhere. But when you layer in to how you learn and what you learn, the schools have become a battleground because the far right doesn't believe in public school. And they've made it an unpleasant place. And if you're a child with differences, the public schools have been a battlefield for those children as victims to those bullies. And you know, this is not all about sexual identity. As a kid, I looked like a victim until I was in high school. I was kind of a chubby kid, but I knew how to fight and I was a very fast runner. So, and you know, in those neighborhoods, those of you who have had this experience, it's not a big deal. Everybody gets in fist fights. And if you do decent in a fist fight, then you get let alone. But if you're a nerd who can't fight, it's a different story. So school is not as pleasant as it could be in some places, and turning our public school system into a battleground and then trying to use it to supplement those who homeschool with extracurriculars and so forth has created a tension that I think is inappropriate myself. Now here in Loudoun County, people who volunteered basically with little political experience but caring a lot for the schools joined this local school boards, and then they're everything but tarred and feathered, and their families were threatened and things like that. So that kind of an environment, in addition to concerns about getting COVID or something else in a school, in a county that is probably split on whether you should be concerned about COVID or other viruses. So it's a difficult thing. Now, I have a pretty wide background, but I wouldn't want to trust my kid to be teaching all that my kid should know. And I'm grateful that the school, in my opinion, was doing very well by my daughter when she was in school. Now she's 30-something. And but I get the sense that's not what's going on now. And I believe the public school is important because done right, it's the pathway to opportunity, to a way to get the best out of the world because you know enough to look in places and to do things. And this is kind of a turn screw operation to be admitted into a world of adults. So, am I concerned that kids aren't showing up at school? No. I think that the pandemic changed a lot of what we do, and the political environment hasn't helped. And I think that all we should do is accept the new reality, deal with the change, and provide ways for children to telecommute, to attend classes at a distance, and to address some of these problems, that is, bullying and so forth. We're in a battle zone here, and I wonder how long this can go on. When I was a kid in New York, I heard about how good the schools in Fairfax were. And this member of Congress I'm talking about, she was upset about those schools teaching certain courses. And that's why she took her kids out of the school and put them back where they came from. Now, some people are upset about Biden's new rules for cars. And I think I've talked about it before. And basically, it's about limiting emissions. And the limitation of emissions, it looks like, is going to favor EVs, electric cars. And some people complain about this, like I'm sure happened when we were going from horses to cars that had motors on them that made them go. And part of the answer here is that we have to find a way to deal with emissions. We're killing ourselves literally with it. You know, we have emissions we don't care about. We actually have a large portion of America that wants every child to be born that could possibly be conceived. And even those that are sitting in a glass tube somewhere. The world has got to get a grip. And in some ways, I occasionally think of the fact that there's going to be a tsunami of pain and suffering for our children, our children's children, if somebody doesn't figure this out. But it seems as a world population, we are so selfish, and we do a lot of these symbolic things that purport to tell the world we care about the environment or animals or whatever. But then, with the other hand, we do something that's so much more dangerous and contradictory of the policy that we claim that we're doing. Well, let's choose another one. Israel. We have decided to give billions of dollars to Israel, despite the fact that we don't have any agreement from them, publicly anyhow, what they're going to do about the ceasefire. So that's our wedge to do something. And if we're not saying, look, we're not going to support a massacre, we're not going to commit indirectly or directly war crimes, killing citizens, non-combatants, children, women. But, you know, the world of politics in this cacophony of contradictory views is going to be our downfall. Well, I've said before, nothing improves your aim like having a target. Aristotle, paraphrased a little bit, but true. He was very concerned with outcomes, the end means. And so, if we don't have a target, we can't hit it. And if we have contradictory targets, we can't expect people to follow us. Now, In this regard, let's take another example. I started talking about censorship. What is a gag order? Is that censorship? Well, no, because I think it's different than writing imaginatively about something or writing in a controversial area. But what if you have a candidate who lies and attacks a member of a court, his family, when there's a case pending before that same judge? Isn't that easier? But then how do we make the policy stick? And the answer is, like with a kid, yeah, go sit in the corner, you're grounded, let's talk about it, you have to tolerate a conversation, persuade me you got it, you're not going to do it again, whatever that is. And my own best example is there was a park near where we lived, 175th Street in the Bronx. It was the second place we lived at, and I believe it was Crotona Park. And I would go in there and run around over the hills and everything else like that. And my dad had a whistle you could hear 10 blocks away. And my dad came into the park looking for me. He was furious. And he hit me one other time, both times on the seat of the pants. And he was a strong man, so it was more pay attention to me. Now, what I found out was that there had been a rape in that park, and some were concerned about safety. And he was upset as much that I was taking a risk that I was unaware of. Now, another time he thought I did something, and he went and hit me on the bottom, and I was giving my explanation as he was doing that, and then he had this childish look on his face, like I persuaded him, and then he said, well, you must have done something else. Well, Trump has done plenty else, and it's not minor, and a pat on his huge ass isn't enough. What we need with Trump is we need to put him in jail. We need to tell him he's going to jail. And he's testing his opponent. He doesn't strike me as a guy who was ever a street kid. But he was big as a bully where he was in height and things like that. So I think he threw his weight around and people didn't test him. And I knew a guy like that who tested me that way. And when he finally attacked my brother, I just saw red and went after him. And I was stronger and faster than he was. But it was just fists. Now we're talking, when Trump says something against a member of a judge's family, he's suggesting what people might do or should do in reaction. And apparently there was a picture put up in which the judge is characterized as, I don't know, you want to say being punished or something. And these words mean a lot in this context because we have data points showing that when Trump says these things, there are people out there, crazy people, doing something about it. So there's that. Back to education. It's interesting that they want people in school, but I'm not sure they want them to get advanced education. Biden has, forgiven, $20,000, up to $20,000 in federal loans among those who continue to hold loans, education loans. And some states are against it. I think it's a baker's dozen. And it's interesting because if you are freeing people who are gifted from it because of education with a lighter economic load, aren't you freeing them to be productive in other ways in society? And I, of course, am spoiled by the notion that when I was a kid, they had the NDAA, National Defense Education Act, and I think, I I had an opportunity there because of my interest in math and science. And they had Regents scholarships. They were available. There were work-study jobs. The student loans required less money for the education you could get. There were scholarships at the school. My parents didn't have much money, so we were eligible for that. But now, the prices of school are outrageous. I'm not saying it's unfair. I haven't studied the economics of it, but it is forbidding if you want to get an advanced education. And in the last week or so, I've had several conversations with people talking about how one nurse, for instance, could figure out how her son, who has certain gifts, to go to college. But what can they afford? And that's a big problem. And if we don't care about that, we can embrace a dumber nation than we already have. It's ridiculous. Now, what can I finish up with, which sounds happier than some of the things I've mentioned? You all know Al Sharpton as a former New Yorker. I knew him when he was a heavy man and representing defendants in some controversial matters. And now I think he lives the life of a man who is trying to perform good acts for the things he believes in. I really mean that. And so it was, and I think he has a good heart, and this is the thing I'm going to choose. He was talking about Trump's Bible sales. And I thought he was, well, he wasn't angry about it or anything, but he got to one point and he said, perhaps Trump would open the book and study its content. Now, I think he was serious. And you and I know we would all sooner levitate than Trump would read a Bible, if he ever read one, including in all of his Roman Catholic studies, where it appears he didn't show up for class, and that's pretty evident in his later years now, when he's the number one enemy of the FBI and of all people in America, of democracy and of the law and order that he recently has proclaimed is what we have to restore in America. This guy is such a hypocrite and such an evil person. I can't believe he's not in jail, and hopefully one of these gag orders will get him in a soft spot, and he'll spend an evening at Rikers. I think that would be nice. So, all the best to you. I don't know what kind of time it will take me in terms of going back and forth to Baltimore. It is possible. Well, we'll see. And if I'm available tomorrow, I'll be talking to you from the Cathedral of Trees. All the best. Bye-bye.